Hello, my creeplings. We're back, and we're going to revisit a series that we started, and we're going to go for installment 2 out of a trilogy. Tonight, we are talking Creepshow Part 2. This was released May 1st, 1987, directed by Michael Gornick, screenplay by George Romero, based on stories by Stephen King. So, the two OGs are still involved at this point. There's a third Creepshow where neither one of them were involved in. We may watch that in the future, and we may talk about that in the future, but going on. This one, oh god, sorry, my eye itched. Definitely feels less creepy, but definitely hits more of the comic booky tone. Same idea, but instead of having 5 stories like the first one did, this one only has 3, held together by an overarching story that hold on a second. Sorry guys, it's allergy season here and my eyes like to water this time of year. And sometimes the allergy medication doesn't really stop it. It just slows it down. So that's what that was. Again, held together by an overarching story, hosted by The Creep. Now, going back to the first one, The Creep was more of a half-rotted corpse that didn't really say anything, but was always there when the story switched from the story in the Creepshow comic to the overarching story that tied them together back to the next story in the overarching comic. This Creep is played for a short moment in live action by the Tom Savini, who is also the makeup effects consultant. There's a whole thing going on with the effects and the effects crew here, which I will talk about in a little bit. So he shows up in the first part, the prologue of the overarching story, and he's the Creep. So we open up in the small town of Dexter, Maine, and a delivery truck pulls up and to a newsstand, and a little boy named Billy is, waiting for the truck. He's sitting on his bike waiting for the truck. Truck's back shutter opens, so this is not like a moving truck, it's more like the canvas topped old ones. So that canvas top opens up to reveal the Creep, who, again, instead of looking like a half-rotted corpse that didn't say anything, this one's very talkative and looks more like a troll-esque person. Very heavily prosthetic. It's not even Tom Savini's voice. For the Creep, it is, where is it? Joe Silver, who was a very well-known voiceover and character actor from, if I remember correctly, the 50s and 60s. There's a lot that he was in. You can look at his IMDb or his Wikipedia page, and you're like, oh, that guy. If you're my age or older. If you're younger than me, maybe not. Definitely, if you're in your 30s, unless you spent a lot of time around your grandparents, or you just like, Me TV, you're probably not going to recognize him too much, but if you're of the Gen X persuasion and older, you'll remember him. At least the voice. So Billy, again, the Creep throws the stack of comics. Billy gets his first issue, and it's got the same cover as the closing cover from the previous film. So, direct sequel comes up. Now, this prologue starts out as live action, but blends into animation. And the animation reminds me of some of the segments of the animated anthology movie Heavy Metal. And I believe there was a video game, an arcade game called, I want to say it was Dragon Slayer, when I was a really wee little girl, that had a lot of animated cuts like story scenes that this reminded me of. I could not find any information on who did the animation in this, which was kind of weird. So we go to the first story, which is Old Chief Woodenhead. And again, I am just going to say it. There's going to be some problematic things because this was 1987. We weren't very sensitive. But I'm just going to say it. I think this was my favorite out of the three. And I'll tell you why as we go along. So, we open in this small... I know that the story was shot in Arizona, so we're going to say southwestern desert town called Dead River. And the dead part's about right. This town is drying up, pretty much a borderline ghost town. We open up on Ray Spruce, who has a general store. He's out front painting a wooden Indian. Kind of like those old cigar store Indians you see in antique shops. Same idea. Now, our cast list on this one is actually pretty impressive, considering we got George Kennedy plays Ray Spruce, who I just spoke of. He was a very prolific character actor throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I think he was in most of the Naked Gun movies. He did a lot of television. I saw him, and I'm like, I know that guy. Again, character actor girl. I pay attention to this stuff. You know, he's, a lot of the time, he's very much the grandfatherly type that I remember, anyway. Very much same here. We have his wife, Martha Spruce, played by, of all people, Dorothy Lamour. Again, maybe some of you youngins don't realize how important that is, but Dorothy Lamour was a huge starlet in the golden age of Hollywood. She did a lot of movies with like Bob Hope and Bing Crosby. She was considered a glamour girl. She was all over the cinema magazines and everywhere. This was her last film role. She didn't die right away after, but she retired after this, considering she had been in semi-retirement and had only appeared on a cameo or guest shot on something about 11 years earlier. So she came out of semi-retirement to do this. So you've got a really heavy hitter, granted, in her twilight years of her career, but still, you know, big name. Definitely interesting. Other characters, actually nobody in here was very, big as well. So if I think of something, I'll name it as I go on. So Ray and Martha Spruce, they're an elderly couple. They run the town's general store. Very much the old-fashioned general store type setup. He's out there touching up the war paint. Again, we're going to bring up some problematic terms. But again, this was the 80s. We didn't know any better. And I'm going to leave it at that. So he's touching up Old Chief Woodenhead's war paint on this life-size wooden Indian. They're talking about, you know, she's trying to get him to, you know, retire, give up the store. They haven't made any money in a while. And, you know, they have savings, etc. So he's like, I don't want to give up on this place just yet. This store helped us during the town's boom years. Let me stay around long enough to, you know, help this town a little bit. Because they apparently still have people who buy on credit and, you know, all that kind of small town stuff you don't see anymore. They get a visit from the elder of a local indigenous tribe. He gives them a bag of jewelry turquoise and silver and carnelian and all, some very nice pieces, which he calls his tribe's sacred treasures. He's giving them to the Spruces to hold on to because they don't want to be debtors. They don't want to take charity. They're considering it, they're calling that collateral on a loan. Now they are borrowers. It's all about pride and respect, etc., etc. Ray, George was the actor, Ray tries to give back, and he's like, no, if you try to give this back to me, that's disrespect. He's like, if we don't pay back our debts in 2 autumns, so 2 years, if we are not able to pay you back, this is yours, and you can sell it for what we owe. Of course, you know, Ray being the type of character they're coding him as, I don't think he would have sold it. But, anyway. But he understands what Benjamin White Moon, the elder, is trying to tell them. You know, trying to get across. He's like, we do not want to be taking charity. So this considers collateral as a loan to what you have given us, probably, gas and supplies on credit because, yeah, let's face it, up until, and even now, granted, you have some tribes who have all the casinos and all that they're making money on, but there's still a lot of, I'm just going to say it, there's a lot of poor people on the reservations, and it has nothing to do with them being lazy or stupid, and everything to do with the way that we set this nation up for its indigenous people way back in the day, and we're still trying to right that wrong. I'm going to get off that horse because I could be on it all day as someone who has a little bit of Cherokee in her background. I find it appalling, and strangely enough, you'd think I'd be pissed off about this one because it deals with the indigenous people, but out of the 3 stories, this one was definitely one of the better ones. I think it was better cast, but it did kind of raise my hackles a little bit. But we're not here for a history lesson on the indigenous people of the United States, nor are we here to talk about the political climate we find ourselves in with those trying to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, like this is the American way, but can't because there's capitalism's in the way. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about this movie. So they have their chat, and it kind of falls into night. So later that night, the Spruces are robbed by Benjamin White Moon's estranged shithead nephew, Sam White Moon. Now, Sam is young, he's vain, and he's an asshole. He's especially vain about, now, he's got that long, thick, dark hair. I will make a note, which is one thing that I didn't like, that the actor who plays Sam White Moon, Holt McCallany, is not native at all. He's whiter than I am. And I'm part Dutch. So, yes. I believe he's mostly Irish American. So, yeah. Now, the guy that they got to play Benjamin White Moon, he was native. So, kudos for him. But this shithead is vain, and he's angry, and he's a punk. It's exactly what he is. And so are his 2 friends that are there, Andy Cavanaugh and Vince Gribbins. Andy's a rich kid who hangs around with Sam for whatever reason, and Vince, his nickname is Fat Stuff. So take that for what you will. They rob the store, and they terrorize Ray and Martha. Well, Sam knows about the jewelry that Ray has. And in between spouting off about how wonderful his hair is and how it's going to get him to Hollywood and get him laid and paid, as he put it, make note of this vanity later. and how Kavanaugh is going to take his Firebird that his rich daddy bought them and fly them to Hollywood. They got a plan. They're just being bitches until they get to it. There's an accident, and Sam's shotgun goes off, kills Martha. So Sam, of course, shoots Ray. He takes the jewelry, and they make a plan that they are going to split up, to go to their places and get whatever's important to them. And at 11 o'clock, Kavanaugh's going to go pick up Sam, and then they're going to go pick up Andy. Or Vince, excuse me. Andy Kavanaugh, Vince Gribbins. Anyway, they rip out of there. After they've separated, we go to Vince's trailer, and we're intercutting between Vince doing Vince stuff and old Chief Woodenhead coming to life, kind of like a wooden golem. Not a character that you see a lot in horror, especially modern horror. It is, I do not know a whole lot about the original mythology, text, stories, whatever you want to call it, but the golem is a Jewish construct, if I remember correctly, made of clay or stone, and, look it up. It's interesting. I don't want to be spouting off facts or information that I'm not 100% sure on. But I do know it's of Jewish origin. I do know the original ones were clay or stone. And I do know it has to have something to do with a mystic mark on the forehead that controls it. We've had some golems in modern horror. This being what I would consider a wooden golem. Technically, the Frankenstein's monster could be listed as a flesh golem. But a lot of the examples that I'm pointing out here of modern day golems don't have that mystic rune or marking on their forehead. But it's the same idea. It's an animated construct. In the case of Frankenstein's monster, it's animated flesh. In the case of Old Chief Woodenhead, it's animated wood. Well, he comes alive. He reapplies his war paint from the red paint that was left outside. And he goes to Vince's trailer and pincushions him with arrows. You do get some... Okay, this is not a very gory... Like, you don't see the arrows going into the body. You see blood splatter on walls, not blood splatter from neck, for example. So it's like, you hear the twang, and they focus on a poster on Vince's walls. This is where you see a lot of boobies, because he's got a lot of naked women on his walls. He also does have an Iron Maiden poster, so rock on to that. So it's like, twang, you're looking at poster, and then it cuts back, and it's arrow. I want to say they shows Woodenhead got him 3 times. Once here, through the shoulder, once through the chest, and once through the forehead. Very cool makeup effects, but again, we'll go over the makeup effects stuff here in a moment. Well, then he goes to Kavanaugh's house, trashes the Firebird, and slaughters Andy with a tomahawk. Again, you see it in shadow. The tomahawk goes down, and then you see the splatter. Again, there's a part of me that is very upset that they are using such stereotypical... But again, this is also one based on comics that were around in the 30s and 40s. And, you know, we all know that kids were still playing cowboys and Indians at the time. And we had Tonto as our big, shining native star from the 30s and 40s. So, in a way, I understand it. I'm not too thrilled with it, but I understand it. I'm not going and giving them a free pass, but I'm trying to understand it within the cultural context of what things were borrowed from. Anyway, Woodenhead gets to Sam, and This one's pretty cool. He scalps that fucker. Takes that prize right off. Next morning, Benjamin, the grandfather, the old tribal elder, wakes up to find the bag of jewelry on his bed. He's, what the hell, shows up at the store, sees the chaos, and sees the statue of Chief Woodenhead now holding Sam's scalp, which actually looked really cool, and a bloody hunting knife. Benjamin gets it. Everything clicks. And he realizes that Woodenhead had done his business and went back into, suspended animation. Benjamin kind of salutes him a little bit, wishes him, the old warrior, a peaceful afterlife, and he leaves, and that's where we end the story. We go into this section is animated again of the overarching story, where Billy now shows up at the town post office to pick up a package. Now, the clerk teases him and is like, "Oh, what'd you get from your comic book?" It's, he goes, one, Creepshow isn't a comic book. Semantics. But he's like, "I got Venus flytrap bulbs." Billy pays for the package and sets off, and then this is where the creep pops up and introduces number 2. This one is definitely talked about a lot when people talk about Creepshow 2. This one was interesting. This one was actually based on a story that showed up in Skeleton Crew. Stephen King short story collection. Skeleton Crew, the story The Raft showed up. So this was based on one of those. So it's mid-October. We got 4 college students. Deke, Laverne, Randy, and Rachel. So 2 guys, 2 girls. They arrive. They're driving in the back, like, I don't want to say backwoods, but they're just on a highway. They're driving to a lake that's kind of out there away called Cascade Beach for some fun. They're getting high. They are talking about how this late in the season no one's going to be there. They're going to have some fun just by themselves. They're talking about, I saw the raft last week. It were like a couple weeks ago. It's still there. Apparently this big raft is in the middle of this lake, and it's kind of a challenge to get out there, I guess. So they start complaining, of course. Deke's the kind of hotshot, sporty, muscle-bound jerk. Rachel is, they kind of hint that she's our ingenue. Laverne's very slut-coded, very promiscuous girl-coded, and Randy is our resident kind of dork. He's pre-med type guy. They're swimming out, and Randy notices after they warm up and they talk about how fucking cold the water is, because this is late September. Randy sees a duck being pulled under the water by something. He's not sure what it is. They all get to the raft, but as they get there, Randy starts noticing that there's this thing in the water, and by the time, I want to say it's Rachel was the last one, that he's like, get her up, get her up, get her up. They get out there, and they realize what Randy was so concerned with. They keep talking about, he keeps saying, "I thought I saw an oil slick, but this doesn't look like your normal oil slick." And they're talking about it. And again, Deke had a little waterproof container, had some joints in it. They're out there smoking again. So everybody but Randy is kind of high as a kite. And again, I'm not saying, ooh, drugs are bad. I'm just saying they're not in their totally focused mind. So, of course, Deke's making fun of it. And Rachel sees it. And it's a big, black, blob-like creature that's just kind of floating on the surface. Kind of resembles an oil slick, but kind of doesn't. Rachel sees it, and she kind of leans over to try and kind of investigate it, and she goes to touch it, and it grabs a hold of her and pulls her into the lake. And it basically, it's like literally like watching the Blob. So this is like the Blob, Aqua version. Water edition. Same kind of, you know, slimy, gooey digestion effect. It was pretty cool to a point. They panic, of course, and they remember that it's currently the off season, or they start talking about how it's currently the off season, and there's nobody there. There's only 3 vacation houses on the lake, and there's no caretaker for those vacation houses at this point. Nobody is going to rescue them. They are stuck on this raft in the middle of the lake. Time passes, the joints wear off, they think they're in their right minds. Deke swears he can swim to the shore, but before he can even make a break for it, this thing squirms up, seeps up through the raft's cracks, and pulls him down. Again, very cool effect. Could have been done better, but I liked it nonetheless. So we're left with Randy and Laverne. Randy kind of is like, okay, so it's still hungry, so we can't do anything. We're stuck here. So they managed to keep it from, kind of evade it by keeping their feet on the boards. As long as they don't, you know, cross any of the little board gaps, I guess it doesn't register that they're there, but it's, you know, around the things. So, they take turns kind of resting, and one rests, one watches. One rests, one watches. They're freezing. These guys are just not going to do well. You can already tell. So, like, it's still late at night. Laverne's like, I'm freezing. Hold me, hug me, something. Let's share body heat. So they kind of fall asleep like that. Randy wakes up, and he starts kissing on Laverne. He lays her back and starts to, you know, feel her up. And she's waking up and whispering no. So, like, no means no, Randy. If you would have listened to this bitch, things would have been a little bit better, I bet. Or not. You don't know. But, he kind of is so into trying to sex her up that he forgot the thing was there. She wakes up screaming because it had seeped up through the thing and it started digesting half of her face. So the blob starts pulling her off the raft and digests her. Randy, horrified, makes a break for it. He actually manages to swim to the shore. A fucker gets this far away from the water line and is like, I beat you at the blob. Well, the blob just pulls a wave move, it rears up, and just right over envelops him and pulls him into the water. The blob returns to the lake. You get a nice burping sound effect. And there's no evidence of the students other than the car and their clothes. Unknown to them, when the camera pans out, there was a no swimming sign, barely visible behind some vegetation. So I keep mentioning the effects, and you know there's something here. So when they were filming the raft, our effects were done by Ed French and Howard Berger. So one part of KNB. So you had Tom Savini as the special effects makeup consultant. You had Ed French and Howard Berger running the thing. Until Ed French left the project due to a tiff with Michael Gornick, the director, while filming The Raft. Apparently, Gornick wasn't happy with either the way the Blob was filming and asked Howard Berger how they could fix it. Well, Ed French just is like, oh no, you should have asked me. At least this is what I was able to glean from a few sources online, one of those being IMDb, that he was kind of PO'd and left the project. So Berger stepped in. Greg Nicotero was a makeup tech on here, so I think he also stepped up. So 2/3 of KNB. Again, so the effects were pretty good. That Blob, I think, yes, it could have been better, but at the time, I think they got the best of what they could get, especially with budget. This had a budget of $4.1 million. It made $14 million at the box office, but it was still considered a flop because it was kind of one of those, people were kind of mediocre. So yes, The Raft was one of those where it tested the crew and somebody walked off. Also, the poor guy who played Randy had hypothermia and had to be taken to the hospital, but he got better, came back, and finished it like a trooper. So we leave with, Blob consumed all stupid college kids into the second interlude, the second part of the overarching story. This one's also animated. So on his way back home from the post office, Billy gets ambushed by local bullies. The gang's leader, his name is Rhino. He's they do your typical fat greaser kid. He takes Billy's package and crushes it, teases him. Billy gets pissed and kicks Rhino in the groin and flees on his bike, and the bullies chase after him. And then the creep appears from behind a tree. We go on to tell the last story of the hitchhiker. Now, I didn't go over anybody in The Raft because there's only 4 actors, and none of them I am aware of. Only one of them was a soap actor. But you go into The Hitchhiker, our main character is played by Lois Chiles. The character's name is Annie Lansing. She was Holly Goodhead in James Bond Moonraker. So, another recognizable face here. So, story number 3, called The Hitchhiker. Annie Lansing is your typical good-looking woman who has a workaholic lawyer husband, and she's got basically a male escort on the side. And we open up with them waking up from missing an alarm due to a power outage, and she realizes she has 15 minutes to get home before her husband does, and her husband is never late. George is never early, he's never late, he's always on time. So, she gets herself ready, hops into her car. By the time she's out on the road, she looks down, she's got 7 minutes to get home. And she gotta go a pretty decent distance. She's starting to get tired, she lights a cigarette, and of course, we have an ember. She basically, I think, either drops the cigarette or drops the cherry off the cigarette, and it causes her to kind of, lose her ability to drive for a moment on a very slick, curvy part of the road, and she hits a hitchhiker. Sign says Dover, so he's Dover bound from somewhere in Maine. She freaks out, drives off, basically hit and runs. Because she's like, no one witnessed the accident, there was nobody there. But shortly after she leaves, the area ends up becoming crowded with a couple of passerby. Her husband, George, comes up on it, and he calls the police from his car phone, and a truck driver. Now, the truck driver is your cameo from Stephen King. Anytime a movie that is or television show, I believe, I know movies, is based on a Stephen King property, he tries to get in as a cameo. This is your Stephen King cameo right here. In Creepshow, it wasn't a cameo, it was a full-on starring role in one of the stories. But here it's a cameo, it's a truck driver. Um, so she's miles away. She's talking to herself, realizes what she's done. She briefly considers turning herself in. It's like, can I live with this? Can I not live with this? She's kind of becoming a little unhinged. Just a little bit unhinged. Just a tiny bit. Sorry, pay no attention to me going off the rails. You pay no attention to that yawn. Again, it's allergy season and I'm taking medication, so sometimes it makes me a little tired. But she ultimately just kind of gets to the point where nobody saw it. I don't even really know that he's dead. He could still be alive. Yeah, I'm not going to turn myself in. I'm not going to say a goddamn thing. I'm going to get off scot-free. I'm going to head home and hopefully beat my husband home. Because the whole ride down there, she's trying to figure out how she can lie to get out of trouble. But before she can go too much farther, I think she stops at a red light or something. Don't quote me on this. I don't remember why. The hitchhiker suddenly appears outside of her window and says, "Thanks for the ride, lady." And she freaks and panics. And, she speeds off. And, he's now on top of the car and reaches through the sunroof. And he grabs her. She drives off the road and through the woods. She knocks the hitchhiker off the roof with a low-hanging branch. He appears again, trying to open the door to the passenger seat, and the whole time he's saying that line, "Thanks for the ride, lady." I think the only line he uses, actually. He starts to open the door. She's got a gun in her glove compartment. She shoots him a handful of times. She doesn't kill him. She manages to kick him out of the car, and then she just runs over him. I mean, if she didn't think he was dead before, she thought he was dead now. But then the hitchhiker climbs onto the hood, and he pulls up his sign that should say Dover, but now it says, "You killed me." And again, she loses control of the car. She drives off the road, down a hill, and into a tree. She, of course, sends the hitchhiker flying into the tree, so she goes back and forth, pounding him into the tree with her car, knocking herself out in the process. Well, eventually she comes to. It's snowing. You can see that, you can make the assumption that some time has passed because of the amount of snow on the car. She doesn't see the hitchhiker anywhere. She thinks it was all a nightmare caused by a concussion. So she gets back on the road and she's making comments about how she can explain why she's late because she had a car accident. She actually gets there before George. And she's like, for the first time ever, he's late. She's like, I wouldn't have had to have hurried up. Little does she know the only reason he's late is because of her accident. So she gets there. She starts to step out of the car. Now the hitchhiker shows back up again. This time he is gruesomely mangled. He looks bad. Again, superb effects works on this particular effect from the team. And he's gruesomely mangled. He's still saying, "Thanks for the ride, lady." He crawls out from under the car and attacks her. The garage door swings shut, and we start seeing the interior fill with smoke. So we cut to now George finally getting home. He finds Annie in her still running car, dead from carbon monoxide poisoning, but with the Dover hitchhiker sign in her lap. This was not my favorite. I think this was my least favorite out of them. I feel like the pacing went up and down and up and down. This one might have done better as a... You know, they do anthology sometimes where it's just two stories, where both of them were a little bit longer. That one might have been better if it had been padded out. I'm not sure, but I know there was something about it that I just didn't like about the pacing. Excuse me. So then that fades out into the ending of the overarching story, where inside the delivery truck, you see the delivery truck again. The creep prepares to drive away and bids the audience farewell, but then he spots Billy, still being chased by the bullies. But Billy leads his pursuers to a vacant lot, swarming with out-of-control plant growth. This is not the first Venus flytrap this kid has purchased from the magazine. And there are 4, and they are giant Venus flytraps. They emerge from the surrounding weeds, and they take care of the bullies for Billy. So, of course, everything ends on a happy ending there. The creep cackles in glee and drives off, and we fade into the end credits. Which, at the end of the end credits, there was a little post note that was very interesting. Now, back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, these horror comics, these EC comics specifically, but like Tales from the Vault, Tales from the Crypt, Creepshow-esque comic books, the stuff that these movies are based on, they were getting a lot of flack for inciting juvenile delinquency. So we've got this. This was taken from Collier's magazine in 1949. So this goes to show you how long this debate's been going on. But it says, juvenile delinquency is the product of pent-up frustrations, stored-up resentments, and bottled-up fears. It is not the product of cartoons and captions. But the comics are a handy, obvious, uncomplicated scapegoat. If the adults who crusade against them would only get as steamed up over such basic causes of delinquency as parental ignorance, indifference, and cruelty, they might discover that comic books are no more a menace than Treasure Island or Jack the Giant Killer. So the debate nowadays, comics are cool, and it's all Spider-Man, Superman, Green Lantern, all, about superheroes and justice. But there, have been times, like I said, you got your Tales from the Crypt, your stuff that Creepshow's based on from the 30s and 40s and 50s. In the 60s and 70s, there were underground comics made for adults. In the 80s, we had a lot of our in 90s, we had a lot of our Frank Miller, Sin City, and The Crow, and those darker, more adult comics. And like music, like bands, comic books were often used as scapegoats for a growing issue with juvenile delinquency, school shooters and all that stuff. It's just entertainment, folks. If parents were parenting and being involved in their children's lives and talking to their children and helping them with their problems, we might not have that much of a problem. Just saying. But I found that interesting that they chose to quote that from a Collier's magazine in 1949. It goes to show you how long the debate on this subject has been going on. So, this was actually supposed to have 5 stories. But they only did 3. There were two other ideas. One did end up getting filmed and put into a different anthology, which is Tales from the Dark Side. If you've ever seen that one, The Cat from Hell, that was originally supposed to be in here, but it ended up getting moved and put into that movie. And remember what I said from Creepshow, the first review of the first movie. Creepshow inspired them to go and try and do a weekly horror show, and they were going to call it Creepshow, but they couldn't get the rights to call it Creepshow, so they did it anyway and called it Tales from the Dark Side. So then that also spawned its own movie. So, it's kind of this weird, creepy circle. Now, it just, to really bring that story down to 2 sentences, it focuses on a wealthy old man hiring a hitman to kill a cat. Because the cat, he thought, had killed 3 other people and was coming after him next. And the cat kind of is exacting revenge. It was actually a very, very well done section. And if I ever talk about Tales from the Dark Side, I will go into that one. The second one was called Pinfall. This one has not made it into any form yet. It has not appeared as a story. It has not appeared as a film piece. It has not appeared in a comic book or anything. It was set to appear after Old Chief Woodenhead in the order of things. And it told the story of two rival bowling teams competing in a bowling alley owned by an aged millionaire. The owner is killed in a freak accident, and the teams find out afterwards that he would have awarded one of the teams $5 million for whoever got the highest score. So soon things take a turn for the worst when the other team, who also was killed in a fire car crash, this one purposefully caused by the first team, they return as burnt up revenants, and they want to get revenge on their killers. At one point in 2014, the segment was funded through a Kickstarter by Dale Teagarden and was successfully pledged by its backers to put the project into a sequel for Tales from the Dark Side of the movie, but that never happened. I would love to see that. That sounds like a very interesting story. Yeah. This was not as good as the first one, but I would still suggest watching it if you are a Stephen King fan. Because, again, The Raft is based on a story that shows up in one of his short story collections. The other two stories come from his brain, but they are written by George Romero. I wanted to say somebody else because I've got another movie coming up that involves Romero and somebody else. So I'm getting my wires crossed. But they're pretty decently done. Like I said, strangely enough, Old Chief Woodenhead was, I think, the best of the three. I think they actually go in order. Old Chief Woodenhead's the best. The Raft is kind of in the middle, and I did not really like The Hitchhiker as much as I would have thought I would have. The effects were good in all of them, but again, I feel like in Old Chief Woodenhead, they definitely went for the more comic booky, cartoony way of doing it. But again, this is based on a comic book, so I shouldn't complain. So Creepshow 2, worth a watch. There is a boob warning. It's rated R by the MPAA, but I think if you'd have gotten rid of the boobs, you probably could have gone for a hard PG-13. So, because the gore, while there is gore there, it is nowhere near some of the levels that modern, like, torture porn, Terrifier levels of gore. Now, granted, I've not seen Terrifier yet, but from what I understand about it, that is a bloodbath. Saw. Nowhere near anything in the Saw situation. It's very mild. But I still think the stories are somewhat, pretty solid to okay. So give it a chance. Creepshow 2. Maybe someday we'll talk about Creepshow 3. We will definitely be talking more about George Romero in the future and Stephen King in the future. And let me know what you think of horror movies based on written works. Are you a big... I like the idea. I watch the movie, I go back and read the source material, or... oh my god, everything's lost in translation, everything's lost in adaptation, it's not worth it, the books are always so much better, or if you're someone that I don't read, I do not have the time or the patience to sit through a novel, or sit through a short story, which is kind of a shame, really, if your brain can't allow you to focus on that, because reading can be very pleasurable, and, kind of stretch your imagination, but not everybody's a reader. But let me know what you think about that whole, Stephen King adaptations, Clive Barker adaptations, Then you've got like your old Cthulhu mythology, from way back in the 30s brought to modern day. What do you think about that? There's a lot of stuff based around that in Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, and all the reimaginings based on his works. How do you feel about that? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get a conversation started about it. But on that note, I'm going to say good night, my creeplings, and say it with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.